Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello and welcome from us. This week, a little bit later on, we're looking at why some foreign investors are sensing a Brexit bonus in the capital. Ploughing hundreds of millions into the regeneration of the Royal Docks, one Chinese company tells us why they think leaving the EU could be good for London. Here this week, Chris Philp, Conservative MP for Croydon South, and Tulip Sadiq, Labour MP for Hampstead and Kilburn. Welcome to you both. We've got to start on one story first, haven't we, really? This week's by-election result in Richmond Park and North Kingston, the Lib Dems pulling out all the stops and succeeding in reversing Zac Goldsmith's 23,000 majority. The Lib Dems say it's a victory for their anti-Brexit cause. Others say that it's not amounting to that much. What can we read into these results? Chris Philp, what do you say about it?
Well, by-elections are funny things and they often throw up funny results. I suppose it's not entirely surprising that an area which voted very heavily Remain, I think about 70% Remain in the recent referendum, voted the way they did, given that Zac was a Brexit-supporting MP and the Lib Dems were successful in turning the by-election into a sort of mini-Brexit referendum. But of course, you know, we had a vote nationally across the entire country and the government won't be changing its policy simply because one area which voted Remain in June effectively voted Remain again, albeit by a smaller margin, only about 50% compared to 70%. Interesting also, the Labour vote shrank to almost nothing, down from 12% to about 3%, which was also something of a surprise.
Tulip, yeah, he lost his deposit, the Labour candidate, Christian Walmer.
Look, if anyone thinks that Labour's going to do well in Richmond, then they're living on another planet. We polled 5% in the 2010 election, so I'm not surprised we did how we did. This was a referendum on Zac Goldsmith and the Tories. And it's not just about Brexit. Londoners paid Zac Goldsmith back for the divisive and, frankly speaking, bigoted campaign that he ran against Sadiq Khan just 6 months ago.
Does it look as if, though, do you accept, does it look as if some Labour supporters there, because the vote did go down considerably on the 2015 election, that some of the voters there have lent their vote, have supported Liberal Democrats here, voted tactically?
In all honesty, I think it was just to make sure that Zac Goldsmith didn't get elected after the way not only did he run the divisive campaign he did against Sadiq Khan, which people still remember about, but it's also, I think this shows, the result shows us that Heathrow is not the #1 priority on everyone's list. It's something that's important, but the bread and butter issues are important to people as well. Housing, education and Brexit, of course.
Do you accept that, Chris, that it maybe indicates that Heathrow isn't all that it's cracked up to be? As well as actually just being the folly of someone thinking that they can, you know, put something like this to the test at a by-election.
Well, I'm not a fan of people randomly calling by-elections as a way of proving a point. I mean, David Davis did it actually about 10 years ago. The way we run our constitution is not that members of Parliament resign and cause by-elections each time they're unhappy about something. It's not the way we run our country.
He was a bit foolish to have done this, was he?
Well, I think it was, I mean, clearly foolish because he lost, but I think also constitutionally it was a foolish thing to do. It's not how we run our country, it's not how Parliament should conduct itself. So I think it was constitutionally foolish as well as politically foolish. But of course there was no Conservative candidate on the ticket. So I think it was, I'm afraid to say, a rather personal defeat for Zac Goldsmith.
But it's also, it can't surely be welcome to you as a party as trying to chart a way forward on Brexit, that this has happened so soon and sends such an obviously clear message.
Well, as I said, Richmond voted overwhelmingly in favour of remaining in the European Union
but
last June.
Overwhelmingly in favour of Eurosceptic Zac Goldsmith in 2015. So they were prepared to be nuanced before. This time they made it absolutely clear what they wanted.
I think it was less clear than in June because the sort of Remain vote or proxy Remain vote went from 70 down to 50. But I think what's clear is Brexit as a political issue in our national debate is clearly much larger now than it was in 2015 because we are actually going to leave the European Union. So it's real and we need to work out the way of leaving the European Union to best advantage to make sure London continues as a great city and our country continues to produce record number of jobs and continues to grow as it has been doing. So it's not surprising Brexit is a bigger issue now than it was in the 2015 general election.
There's something that really focused on the Conservatives. Let's move on. We've got a lot to get through and we want to move on to the next thing as soon as we can. Sadiq Khan was elected mayor on a programme which put housing to the fore. But what happened this week to one of his key pledges, the one claiming that half of all new homes built would be affordable? Tanjil Rashid reports.
More affordable housing for Londoners, one of Sadiq Khan's flagship policies as mayor. 50% of all housing built in London would need to be genuinely affordable, or so he pledged on the campaign trail.
At least half of all new homes that are built, that are given permission for, should be genuinely affordable.
50% of all new homes built in London are genuinely affordable.
But this week it emerged that the Mayor was now relaxing his 50% affordability target in order to give developers more of an incentive to build homes. Developers now only need to ensure 35% of homes built are affordable. Critics say the Mayor has broken a promise.
Here we have a Labour Mayor who enters into an election saying he's going to build 80,000 homes a year, and he's going to have 50% affordable homes of all those. And we get 7 months on and he issues his own press release saying, actually guys, I was only kidding. It was a joke. And you fell for it. And he now says it's 35%.
Sadiq Khan has won some plaudits for his housing policy.
You have to remember we're coming from a situation where developers were getting away with just 13% of what they were building being affordable. And what we're seeing here is a promise to be much tougher with developers and make them really up their game.
But is the Mayor missing the point? Some believe his affordable housing policy is too focused on ownership, and he needs to tackle high rents.
What we were promised during the election was real action on rents for people who are struggling to afford their privately rented homes. What we've seen today is basically a re-announcement of an existing Tory government scheme that's called Rent to Buy. The things they've announced seem to be aimed entirely at people who are well on the way to owning their own home already, people who are slightly better off, up to £60,000 in income. That's way above the average.
The ability to afford a home is an issue close to many Londoners' hearts. Can Sadiq Khan afford to disappoint them?
Well, James Murray is here, Deputy Mayor for Housing. Welcome to you. Let's start with this point about if you're trying to hit 50% and that's still a target, why do you say to developers 35%?
So the measure about having a threshold of 35% is a first step. It's one measure we're using straight away to try and raise the amount of affordable housing in the system as we move toward a long-term goal of 50%. So what you've got to understand when you're trying to increase the amount of affordable housing in London is that you have the planning tools, which is where threshold comes in, but you also have investment hand in hand. And so we secured, after really good negotiations with government over the summer, £3.15 billion, which will go into building more affordable housing in London. And that kind of money can go to housing associations, for instance, who can build at least 50, sometimes even 60% affordable housing in their programmes. And together, this moves us in that direction.
So are you saying that you can say to developers, you only have to build a third, that are not only, because it's still quite a lot historically, a third that is affordable, because the amount of affordability you get from housing associations with other providers will bring the average up to 50% eventually? Is that what you're saying you are going to do?
That is part of it, but I think it's really important
to... part of it? Is that what you mean?
If you just let me say why I think that's part of it, I think it's really important to understand that it's these are first steps in the direction we need to take. If you look at what we inherited, so we inherited a situation where just 13% of homes given planning permission under the previous mayor were affordable. We were starting at rock bottom, and so we all recognise it's going to take time to increase those numbers. But what we've done is we've come up with a way here of increasing the amount of affordable housing ahead of the new London plan, which is going to come out in draft next year, trying to increase the amount of affordable housing even ahead of that coming out. And I think, what's really interesting, if you look at the reaction to what we came out with this week, you had someone from Shelter in your clip who was being positive about it. But we've also had Tony Pidgley from Berkeley Homes saying he can make this work, he can live with what we're saying.
Well, I imagine developers will be very happy that it's not being asked to present...
My point is, if you've got Shelter, and developers and the big housing associations all saying, you know what, this is ambitious, but it's practical, that's a good way to take it on with us.
And you'll know that what Shelter also say is that it was absurd to make the claim that you could go to 50% affordability straight away and give that impression in an election campaign. Do you regret that impression? Because it just allows people like me to constantly say it's a broken pledge, or it's a pledge that's now been shoved into the long glass.
I think we've been clear right from day one that it's a long-term target. It's going to take time to get there because we inherited
day one from the mayoralty.
If I can just say,
day one from the mayoralty. Do you mean?
as soon as we got in, we were very clear.
As soon as we got in, but the point I'm making about the pledge he made during the campaign, which was going to be 50% affordability. We hit the ground running. Anyone comes forward with a plot, we want half of all these homes to be affordable.
OK, but let me just be really clear. So, in the manifesto, it said that we're going to set this target of 50%. It said we're going to work with boroughs and others to move toward that. And it's very clear, upon taking office, you realise quite how rock bottom it is in terms of the amount of affordable housing inherited in the system. And so what we've done over the last 6 months is work together with councils of all different political backgrounds, with the government, with home builders, with housing associations, with everyone across London and Londoners themselves to work out how to increase the amount of affordable housing toward our long-term target of 50%. And the kind of stuff that we're talking about today is a first step. It's a few measures which we're going to use to get the amount of affordable housing up quickly.
And just let me double-check whether by the end of this term, this mayoral term, you will be hitting 50% affordability. Is that the plan? Because you're talking about first step, presumably this. Yeah. So your final step will be, what, in the last year of the mayoralty?
We're going to have the draft London plan coming out next year, which is going to set out this overall target of 50% and how we're going to move toward it. But this is some early first steps we can do to move in that direction. So I think it is really, really important to understand that the planning threshold, this kind of minimum threshold of getting it up to 35 and beyond, is a way of moving up from the 13% which we inherited, and it works hand in hand with the funding. The £3.15 billion towards 90,000 affordable homes by 2021.
£3.15 billion from the Conservative government, your government, Crystal. But I know Andrew Boff makes the point he does, but you've heard the reasoning. You can't just go from 13% the last year of Boris Johnson's mayoralty to 50% straight away.
Let's start with the facts. Over the 8 years of Ken Livingstone's mayoralty and the 8 years of Boris Johnson's mayoralty, there were affordable homes in the low 30s. I think it was 31 under Boris Johnson, 33 under Ken Livingstone. Everybody, those are the facts. Everybody told Sadiq Khan during the campaign that 50% was completely unachievable, but he chose to nonetheless claim he would hit 50% for reasons of electoral expediency. No wonder people lose trust in politicians. And he didn't say he'd aspire to it or get to it over some period of time. He said he would amend the planning guidelines immediately to hit 50%, and here he is breaking his promise.
Isn't this a slight problem, Sadiq, Tulip, that this must happen to you? You must have had the impression people in your constituency felt there was a pledge and it was going to happen pretty quickly.
I will not take any lectures from the Conservative Party on affordable housing. You've already heard the stat. 13% of the homes that were approved last year, these are the facts, were affordable housing.
But I'm not asking that really. I'm asking about whether he overpromised.
Sadiq Khan has done more in 6 months of being mayor in terms of affordable housing, fighting with the Conservative government, which I watched until he got the £3.5 billion. Why didn't Boris Johnson do that? He was a Conservative mayor with a Conservative government.
Your government recognises this because it has given them money expressly for 15,000 affordable homes each year, 90,000 over the 5 to 6 years. You know how difficult it is.
That's right. Look, Boris Johnson, by the way, delivered 31% over his mayoralty, and Sadiq Khan said he would immediately change the planning guidelines. He has broken that promise. Look, I'm delighted a Conservative government has recognised this problem and provided £3 billion, as we've heard, for affordable houses in London. And in the autumn statement, a further £1.4 billion across the country to deliver 40,000 affordable homes. So I'm proud it's a Conservative government which is delivering affordable housing, while it's a Labour mayor who is shamefully breaking his promise.
A final word to you, James. Are you proud of this Conservative government that's given you this opportunity?
I am really proud of the work that we've done with the government and with everyone across London. We've come in, the slogan, a city for all Londoners. What that really means is working with everyone across London. So what that means in practice is working with councils of all political backgrounds. This is above party politics. This is about us taking leadership here, working with the national government.
Look, I tell you, he'll even work with your Croydon.
Good.
Even after you've been so aggressive. Still your local authority. All right. Well, we'll be returning to it often. For the moment, thanks very much indeed. Some have been predicting that Brexit will drive away the foreign money that has flowed into London in the past decades. But what is the attitude among Chinese investors in particular, who've taken such a keen interest in opportunities in the capital? Andrew Cryan reports.
Since the summit, the 60% of Londoners who voted to remain have had plenty to grumble about. A spike in racist attacks, a collapsing pound, uncertainty about the future.
But if you want to look for it, there's plenty of good news as well. The economy's still growing. The fall in pound, well, it makes things expensive for us, but people around the world have just been handed a massive discount in London. It means we had a boom in tourism this summer, and there are lots of signs that people are willing to invest in London still in a very big way.
30,000 jobs are set to be created just across the water from City Airport in the Royal Albert Docks, a new Chinese-owned financial centre. Designed as an Asian business hub, it covers a 35-acre site, roughly 20 football pitches. The planning permission guarantees that 40% of jobs will go to local people, and the first buildings will be finished in 2018.
Now, all of this has been a long time coming. ABP, the company in charge here, first got involved in the site in 2008. Planning permission was signed off in 2014, but the money was only signed off last month when 4 Chinese banks approved a loan of £1.7 billion. Now, ABP say that Brexit, far from being a hindrance in getting that money, was actually a help.
Chinese, all the Asian, and in fact, the Asian world, seeing post-Brexit is now finally come is a very good idea for Britain. They will see surely the exchange rate gone down, suddenly it is 10% discount on most of the purchase, and make them more interesting on investing into London, especially into real estate, but also surely to expand their business in London. We are always happy when business is doing good, and I see that UK are doing good business. With Brexit is the key.
The local MP is the Remainer Stephen Timms, who says he had been worried for the future of the site.
It is about Chinese and other businesses coming into Europe for the first time and wanting to trade with the whole of Europe. And obviously there's a question mark at the moment about what exactly our future trading relationship with the rest of Europe is going to be. So I'm pleased that the project is going ahead. As you say, the currency change has helped, but I think it does reflect a wider confidence.
Last year, Britain literally laid out the red carpet for the Chinese President Xi and promised a new era of Sino-British relations.
The more we trade together, the more we have a stake in each other's success.
But rather than a gateway into the EU, some think the root of all of this is that the Chinese see London as a way into the global financial markets.
The Chinese government have taken a long-term view that London is their gateway into the world's financial architecture. So perhaps the most interesting thing that's going on, and has been going on for the last 4 or 5 years now, is how China is investing in the ecosystem of the City of London.
But the Chinese are also snapping up London property. This is Spire London, a new Chinese-owned block set not just to be the tallest building in Canary Wharf, but the biggest residential tower in Western Europe. According to one estimate, Chinese companies are investing £4 billion in London property this year, up by a third on the year before, making them, some reckon, the biggest investors in the capital at the moment.
Some of it is down to the fact that actually the Chinese market has cooled. So actually there's a big desire from developers from China to actually expand their market reach and actually diversify outside of mainland China.
Last summer, the Chinese stock market crashed. Some property is proving hard to sell, and putting your money into London still looks like a safe bet. Perhaps the question is for how long?
Tulip, do you accept that kind of optimistic picture?
Well, you know, we need investment in London, obviously, and I'm glad that Sadiq Khan has made it clear that London is open for business. But if you're asking me whether I'm optimistic about the future of the country in light of Brexit, I'll be honest and say I'm very worried. We haven't seen any kind of plan from the Conservative government. It's shambolic. All I know is that Brexit means Brexit. I actually don't know what that means. And I know the notes from an aide that was leaked to the press. I'd like to hear a long-term plan from the Conservative government about what happens.
Look at the possibility. Maybe it could mean having cake and eating it. Look at this Chinese businessman saying no problem.
I think this is one of many investments that we need to look at, and I do think he's being a bit too optimistic, in my opinion. I'm glad he's investing. We need homes. An independent IPPR report said we need 50,000 homes in the capital to keep up with the pace of demand. But do I really think this is going to achieve it in light of Brexit? Probably not.
What do you make of that, Chris?
Well, I obviously, like Tulip, welcome the Chinese investment in regenerating parts of East London. I welcome the fact that they're investing in building houses and that they're willing to look through Brexit, as Nissan did, to, I hope, a prosperous future ahead, provided we get the negotiation right. One thing that just does slightly concern me is the idea that some of these developments get sold, the apartments get sold off-plan overseas, sometimes in the Far East, and I would like to see an emphasis placed on selling those houses to first-time buyers in London who are struggling to get on the housing ladder, and that is an area which I'd like to see more attention on.
What about the point we were hearing a lot, that people would, that the Chinese wouldn't come and set up their European headquarters here, and that was a plan, particularly in that site in East London, because of Brexit? Well, it looks like he's quite happy.
It doesn't look like he's quite happy, and I'm delighted by that, and I'm delighted by Nissan's plans in Sunderland, and I hope if we do get this negotiation right, and it will be difficult, by the way, I hope we see many more international companies using London and using the United Kingdom as their headquarters. It's good news for our city.
I just wonder whether it's a kind of early sign of the kind of, you know, flexibility that international business and huge capital ends up being able to find and adopt.
Well, if we can adopt it and work in London, I'd be delighted, because no one cares about London more than London MPs probably, I'd say. But it depends on what happens with other investments. This is one of many, as I've said, but I do want to make sure that we have a long-term plan. And I'd echo Chris Phillips' words, actually, about making sure that homes are not sold off to foreign developers and to foreign homeowners who buy it and don't live in their homes and take it away from Londoners.
All right, running out of time. Now for the rest of the political news in 60 seconds.
London Mayor Sadiq Khan has unveiled a £7 million programme to give young Londoners the skills to access jobs in the capital's digital, technology and creative industries. The Mayor's digital talent programme will have a particular focus on boosting the proportion of women and black and minority ethnic Londoners in the industry. Further rail disruption flagged up this week. London Underground office staff have voted for industrial action over ticket office closures. And the train drivers' union ASLEF looks set to strike on December the 13th over their opposition to driver-only operation of carriages. Paramedics are not being dispatched to thousands of 999 calls as London Ambulance Service struggles to cope with a record number of emergencies. The service revealed that crews were not being sent to about 2,500 patients a week to enable it to target resources on the most seriously ill.
Chris, you've been instrumental in helping get a limited amount of compensation for people coming through Southern. No end to this industrial action, though. Your government needs to intervene and sort it out, doesn't it?
Well, the compensation is a small step in the right direction, but we need to take urgent action to upgrade the points and the signals, and the RMT and ASLEF need to end their completely pointless strike that is inflicting misery on hundreds of thousands of people every single day.
Getting to that board and the leadership of the company and saying, come on, get together and find a solution.
Well, I mean, the RMT have already accepted the drivers will open and close doors from January, so they're striking over something they've already agreed to. They should call off the strike immediately. It's causing widespread misery.
We have tube strife as well, and of course Sadiq Khan was the person that was going to end all the kind of the tube strife in future.
Government needs to sit down and talk to people properly and figure it out. What I would say to you is that people don't strike lightly. If they strike, it's because it's a last resort and they have no other options.
But he said he was going to reduce it. It looks like it's all going to start happening again.
Well, the government needs to play a role as well, and Sadiq needs to play a role. I mean, we all need to come together and make sure this doesn't happen, because it severely does dispute commuters and their travels.
OK, to you both. Thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
I've been getting away